If you use the word gems, I'm going to sue you though, because I have a copyright on the term gem used in
what I'll
JRPG
do
context.
In my intro, I'll just say these underrated gems in quotation marks around me. I'll just put quotation marks floating above me, and then like
you gotta have Brandon's gem thing,
or just like
use my icon.
Just have like the gems like twinkling next to you.
I'll just like hidden gems, and as I say gems, it just like his logo pops up right next to me.
You'll be hearing from my lawyer.
Hi, and welcome to the JRPG Pursuit, a podcast all about JRPGs, from collecting, playing, and diving into interesting discussions. So I'm Emily.
I'm Branden.
I'm Abdallah.
And today we are diving into a rather controversial topic that we've been meaning to talk about, I think, for quite a while. And it's something that has been brought up a lot, especially among people who really enjoy Japanese media and content, and particularly JRPGs. So when it comes to localization, we wanted to kind of talk about the progress localization has seen over the past few years and kind of address whether or not we think localization has improved or maybe gotten worse for the past decade or so. So how do we want to kick off today's discussion, guys? Do we want to maybe dive into some of the earlier localizations we remember from maybe back in the 80s or 90s?
I think so. Being the resident old, I can dig back into the dusty
old dinosaur
of my memory and get us some of that stuff. I've talked about before, maybe even on the show, about how my first JRPG was Dragon Quest, and I could read at the time. I think I was in second grade when it came out, first or second grade when I got it, and so I could read, but like, it was written in such a weird way. It used like kind of Old English light, right? Like, it wasn't super heavy on the Old English, but it was these and thous and thines and whatnot. And, I know that they made that choice in localization because that was not it. Like, the Japanese script was not written in like whatever the equivalent of Old English would be in Japan, right? It was just written in Japanese, just like conversational Japanese, I'm assuming. So the
I'm wondering how modern it was.
That's a good question.
Like, at the time.
If anybody knows, if anybody has some knowledge of Japanese and how the original Dragon Quest was written, let us know in the comments, because I've always been kind of curious about that. I just know that like the choice to use those sorts of terms in the English version was just like a choice that they made because it seemed medieval, right? They're talking about swords and knights and dragons and stuff.
And something that they thought the Western audience would immediately like understand if they read it in that manner, right? Yeah.
It was shorthand for this is ye olde setting, right? Ye olde fantasy. Yeah. And so that was a little confusing for me as a very young kid trying to play the game. Not that it mattered much because I was just like in awe of everything happening in the game. I was just like, wow, it's so big. It's so beautiful. It's amazing. And I never came close to beating it, but So I mean, going as far back as that, I mean, that's a localization that you could make the argument that it wasn't quote unquote faithful to the original text because it made a choice that was not necessarily what the original made, right?
Yeah, it took liberties, right, to make it seem more in context to what people thought of as fantasy back then, like the medieval, maybe not quite Tolkien-ish sort of fantasy, but somewhere in between, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, Dragon Warrior is very much of that like style, and you look at it from a visual perspective, and it like breaks the difference of like, the difference between translation and localization in these kind of situations as well, is that you're trying to play towards what fits the narrative there, or what fits the theme that you're trying to bring to this locale,
new audience,
the US,
right?
this new audience and everything like that. So you're trying to play to that perspective. And
it's making a choice, right? And it is like when you localize,
an artistic choice, right?
Yeah, it's an artistic choice. When you're making a localization, you're doing a localization of an original work. You have to make choices, and they made that choice. Whether that choice is good or bad is, of course, up to
A little bit
everyone's
subjective,
opinion.
no?
Yeah, I think
Very
it's subjective,
subjective.
right? Like, at the end of the day, like it still communicated everything that it needed to communicate. And it was, you know, we're talking about something very simple, right? I don't know how much dialogue there was
Not much
in Dragon Quest. Not a ton, but you know, they still were able to communicate the things that they needed to for the most part. Some of it was kind of hard to follow, but I don't know whether maybe the original was also hard to follow. Some of the choices made. It's similar, like you look at a game like Castlevania 2 for the Nintendo. The people you talk to in Castlevania 2 in English, they seem to intentionally deceive you. And from what I understand in Japanese, that is not the case. They just very plainly tell you the things that you need to know, and then you go and do those things. So that is a different kind of localization choice. I'm assuming, and maybe I'm off base, but I'm assuming that they made the choice to make it more obscure. I'm guessing having something to do with like the rental market in the US. They didn't want people to rent the game and be able to beat it in a weekend and then not buy it. So intentionally obfuscate some of the
that
things
was
you need to do.
That was very popular in the US.
You have this dark, like paranormal sort of setting, right? And so some sort of mystique or mystery, like you see in a lot of the Dracula films and other sort of parallel media, right? I think they're trying to reinvent that. So you have a touch of familiarity, but also maybe intrigued so you could keep wanting to play the game because maybe they thought it was too boring if they just, you know, did a 1-to-1 translation there.
And it's a mixture. I think it's a mixture of both of those items. Is like, you know, the rental market had a very big pull, and a lot of the developers and either localization teams kind of worked with that in tandem with like a lot. If you look at like a lot of the NES games, especially, they really went out of their way sometimes to make them extra hard. Just so that way, like, because like if you didn't have it as hard, you'd finish it probably in like 20 to 30 minutes.
And even like tweaking, even tweaking the AI of like the compute, like the way the game would play, they'd make it more difficult, right? To prevent people from not having to buy the game, which it is what it is. Like it's fine.
It's a product of time.
Now it's
the times are different back then.
Nowadays people just play entire video games on stream and nobody cares, and you can just watch somebody play the entire game from start to finish, and nobody's getting that upset about it. So times have changed, but
the interest for video games I think are much greater than maybe in the past.
Yeah,
in that respect, and it's much more accessible, right? You don't have to drive out to some rental store and hope it's on the shelf for you to go and play it, right?
Download it if you're cool with digital gaming. You just download it to your device and go. So
and I think people are more like, I guess they scrutinize games a little bit more in terms of like they expect a certain level of polish to come from that, except if you're a Pokemon fan, that is. I'm sorry.
They
Shots
have
fired.
Conditioned you to be okay with it. I don't know. Nobody's okay with it, but everybody keeps buying them. So
no, I'm just kidding. Not really.
They're hoping the new kids who it's their first Pokemon game, they won't notice.
They're not going to have anything to compare it to.
And then the parents are, since they have that nostalgia for Pokemon, they want their kids to experience something similar with these new titles, even if they are quote unquote not subpar comparison.
Yeah.
But going back to the whole rental market and how games were with localization tie-ins, it just makes me kind of wonder, what direction, prior to just the focus of localization for this audience who was not really familiar with anything Japanese. And I want to say there was maybe some still animosity towards Japan after World War II with that generation and accepting their media to come out over to the West. And so a lot of the changes I think were definitely deliberate as a way to, make that media more palatable, I would say. For the West. And I think we were talking earlier in the show about anime, since this definitely, I think, runs parallel to anime with video game localization. And a lot of the 90s, animes definitely took some liberties when it came to some localizations. We were talking about Pokemon in particular with an episode. Was it some onigiri was translated as jelly-filled donuts? So
yeah,
it's
because
always
like
interesting what they did back then. And I find it kind of humorous, though. I know some people take offense to it nowadays. That
people can
there's
get up in
liberties
arms
taken.
about those sorts of changes. Some of it was, I think, an attempt to de-Japanify stuff because there was an assumption that this market would reject it if it was too Japan-y, because it was seen as a very weird country.
Yeah.
Like there would be jokes on like Simpsons episodes about like their bizarre game shows and stuff, and was like, that's so crazy, they're so kooky, and
they're so wacky and weird.
Yeah, if you want your stuff to be taken seriously, you don't want it to be associated with that, so you de-Japanify it.
And also, I think like a lot of people who were, you know, part of building the media here in the West, there's just a lot of animosity, at least here in the U.S., with Japan after World War II. Like I know my grandparents' generation definitely they held grudges.
Yeah,
what happened?
And I think it's like it's the biggest thing is like this business. Like if you I mean, even look at today's date, like, you know, executives as soon as they get involved with anything creative, it gets messy. So like at the time, you know, they would look at it as like, well, that's, you know, the market, like the American market's different. Like we can't, whatever is good for Japan is not necessarily good for us. And a lot of the Japanese terms and or ideas have to be retranslated to kind of fit an American concept, which I mean, happens to this
assumption
day.
though.
Yeah, no, 100%. So like that was pretty prominent at that time, where you had like, you know, cultural things like onigiri or rice balls being changed to jelly donuts, and or just about anything they would talk about sometimes, like from a Japan perspective, like say like the tanuki. When you look at like Mario, and you look at things like, we called it the raccoon suit, because there's no, like, we didn't know what a tanuki was.
Tanuki,
you know, like we didn't grow up. We didn't grow up with that like idea of like what the animal was or whatever it is. So like they had to make it where we can relate to it, and that's all about relating to things, and that's where like localization comes in. But at the same time, there's also things that like they did not want to happen. And I know we were talking about it earlier, as we were talking before the stream, like in that era of Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo of America was very big against like any sort of iconology in terms of like religious iconology or anything that might kind of have some sort
remotely
of
upsetting, right?
Yeah, anything that might upset anyone. They played it very, very clean in terms of what they would allow, and I think the Japanese are more open about like just throwing concepts and ideas and things like that into different games, like, you know, Castlevania and other games like that use probably specific types of iconology. And so like there's a lot of that you'd see in the earlier years. So it's interesting to see like the shift over time to like making that more open, because like it's also a period of like, if you look at like America in the 80s, 90s, like parents were afraid of video games. Like they were afraid of like what they were going to do. They're going to rot your mind. They're going to create like these, like, it's going to make you violent. It's going to make you all these different sorts of things. And so, especially when like the original Nintendo and the Super Nintendo were around, they were like, Nintendo was just like, we have to play it safe because we don't want to ruin it. Like the video game market was so scary after like the bubble burst in the late, like in the 70s, 80s, coming out of the Atari phase and stuff like that. So they just had to like make sure they played really safe with all of that.
Yeah, video games didn't make me violent; they just made me a dork. But
100%.
There was a lot of concern around there.
There still is to this day. Honestly,
you
hear
it still comes up.
You know, this topic's still brought up, even though it's been a little bit debunked.
Exactly.
Somebody brings out that old chestnut. But I think that the way that media in the 80s and 90s, maybe even early 2000s to an extent, sort of covered up the Japanness of some of the things in anime and video games. You know, as offensive as that might seem to our sensibilities today, I feel like it went a long way towards helping the West accept Japanese media on its own merit, right? Like they sort of Trojan horsed it into our culture. And if they had just come in with their onigiri and all this stuff that like didn't make sense to us,
they came in with their onigiri.
Most people would have been like, I'm not into that. It's weird. I don't get that.
Yeah.
I think they would have outright rejected it as well.
Yeah.
I know when I was growing up in the 90s. A lot of kids still didn't like the idea of anime. Like, you got made fun of if you watched anime or admitted to, playing video games or anything like that.
Right.
So
yeah, that was a whole different time. Yeah,
I never admitted it, but I still got made fun of. I don't understand. What was I doing wrong?
It's just your face.
But yeah. So they actually kind of did us a favor, and it's I feel like it's maybe too easy to look back on past eras and through the lens of our modern sensibilities and judge the behaviors of people back then.
Globalization was not a thing back then as much, though.
No,
like we didn't have the internet. We didn't understand how other people and cultures operate. Like even like some things today, if there's some pushback on how some so-called like cultural aspects of how you like converse with people, they can't. A lot of people have difficulty understanding why you would maybe talk to someone in a certain manner, or isn't this rude? So sometimes it makes sense to localize around that. But I don't know. I think we're in an interesting, part of the whole localization trend, where before there had to be a big kind of skewness towards making it as Western as possible, just so that it could be adopted and more easily integrated into, other cultures. But now we're at a point where we are, there's more familiarity of some other cultures, whether it's food or mannerisms. It's a lot easier to kind of have that be intermingled with, I think, a lot of localization today.
Yeah. And that I think that track would take us nicely towards the future. There's one other thing I want to point out, and Abdallah, you'd mentioned this before we started recording, about the early days and some of the choices that they had to make around localization. And that is just the fact that there was such a limitation on storage space, right? So Japanese is a very efficient language in terms of how it's written. You can express complex ideas with very few characters often in Japanese. And to express the same idea requires many, many more characters in English to do.
Yeah, it's the same thing with other, I think, symbol-based languages. I think Chinese is the same way.
Yeah.
And some others as well.
So it's challenging when these games are coded and have a limited amount of space, just a limited number of bytes, and a character is a byte, and you've only got so many characters you can squeeze in. To find a way of conveying what is being conveyed in a language that it was just not, they did not have in mind when they were originally creating it. So you get some goofy, right? Like you do get some kind of goofy localizations, some goofy translations in the 80s and 90s. And, as we nowadays, that's not a thing, right? Like we're fine. You can, I'm sure there are limitations. I don't want to say that there aren't because I don't know enough about it to say for sure. But, it's not
issue.
like it was. Yeah, it's not like it was. So, taken in that context, I almost feel bad being critical of old localizations because it's like not only did they typically have here's a spreadsheet. You have 1 week. One person has 1 week to localize this whole game using a spreadsheet. They also had such terrible restrictions on character length and stuff. So they did the best that they could, and
they had to make it work.
Thank you to all of you soldiers out there who did it. Ted Woolsey, I mean, he was among the best. There were plenty of other unsung heroes, and I'm grateful because
to jump into for instance, let's say Xenogears. You're talking about a game that was translated by one person in a very quick turnaround. And that game is extensive. There's so much content in that game.
Very dialogue heavy.
It is all dialogue. You're just reading a novel at that point. And that was just one guy. And it took him how long was it? Maybe, I think he had a very short turnaround. I can't remember exactly.
I know it was a tight window, and it was one person, and there you can kind of forgive some of the oddities that are in that script because it's poor guy, he didn't have the resources to make this. I'm sure what he would have wanted it to be.
I'm just picturing the higher up sending him this here's a spreadsheet of all the dialogue from Xenogears, and he's all right, you have this this limited amount of time. and he's just like scrolling through this whole thing, going like,
and he
what?
asks like, can I see the game to see like the context? And they just smack him in the face. Like, don't even answer, just smack him in the face. And he's like, sorry. And he just goes and gets to work.
I know.
I mean, that's kind of how it was.
Yeah. Well, it makes you appreciate, I think, modern localization, how there's a lot more resources. And just people, teams who are working on this to produce something. And definitely not like what it was back then.
Yeah.
No,
because I think, for the most part, it's safe to say that they care about what they're working on. Mm-hmm. You don't get into this field that is so controversial, I guess, in this day and age, unless you really do care about this media.
And it's so difficult.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm awful with other languages. Like, I can't fathom going into that line of work and being able to just turn over something so quickly.
Yeah, I would love to be able to do it myself. My language skills are not at the level where I would actually be very helpful in it. But like I do really like that. I like the idea of, communication in general is like my thing. I really like that.
Yeah.
So I think I would enjoy it to an extent, but I just unfortunately don't have the language skill to be able to do it. But I do like to hear about it. Like, I read a lot of stuff written by localizers. I study a lot of this. You know what I mean? Like, it's just interesting to me. It's almost like a hobby, if you want to call it that. But like, I really do like it. So
yeah, this is a topic that's near and dear to me, just because back in the day, I used to do editing from Japanese to English when I lived in Hiroshima, doing working for the peace organizations there. So it was a lot of like heavy languages, a lot of like really interesting stories that you'd have to kind of like figure out how to translate or just like fix in English, because like they would translate it, but then you'd also get like this like, and that's where localization comes in. It's like some things like one-to-one don't always sound right in English. And so you have to kind of like
understand what it's really getting at, right?
Yeah, because like a lot of Japanese is very nuanced. Like it's situational of like how it's the characters being used. Like it could be the same word could be taken in different meanings depending on the situation or how it's being conveyed. And so like you have to come up with like how you're going to deal with that and how you're going to express that in English. And sometimes those things don't even translate like in general. Like there's some words in Japanese that just don't have a true English one-to-one word, or you can describe it maybe like as like a feeling of like a thing that we do or something like that. But like
one of the first ones I remember is like yoroshiku onegaishimasu, like that, just like it's used often as like, so Jen's using Duolingo because we're going to Japan later this year, and she's like, I want to learn some of the basics, to be able to get around. And she's like, yoroshiku, she's like learning that is nice to meet you, and she's like, so that means nice to meet you? And I'm like, well, yeah, it can. Or also like a billion things, depending on, you know what I mean? Like, it's very, and that's the thing about Japanese is it's an extremely context high language. Like English is a very low context language. Like we restate and overstate, the subjects of our sentences, and just at just like a simple example, right? Like we're putting the pronoun for the person we're talking about in every sentence. He rides a bike, he goes to work. We don't say he rides a bike, goes to work. You know what I mean? We put he in there because we're making sure
we're naming who's it's about.
Yeah. The
and
subject's
Japanese, like I said, it's just a very basic example. They don't need to do that. There's no need for that. I think that would probably read weird to them if you did throw the subject in there every single time. I feel like they'd be like, what are you doing? So when you are, when you're localizing a piece of media, if you were to do it actually literally, you would get stuff that just wouldn't either wouldn't make sense, or if it did make sense, would just read so strangely to an English speaker that it would take you out of the experience.
Yeah, and I think there's been so much controversy of things being not translated correctly because they're taken out of context, right? Or the literal translation didn't really describe exactly what they meant.
And like every person like learns Japanese differently, and so like when you're, or like there's different ways to say different things depending on where you learn Japanese, or how the version of the type of dialect or something like that you might be taking in. Most people learn like the typical dialect of like Tokyo or something like that, the centralized dialect. But at the same time, like that's always irked me when I see online when people are saying like, hey, like it's just not one-to-one, like it's slightly off, and they'd show like a screenshot of the Japanese and then the English, and it's like just slightly like it's the same concept but worded maybe a little differently how you maybe one person would interpret it. And so it's like it doesn't make sense to be like, first off, it's like your own relationship with the language, like how you like your experiences and your background in the language will make you translate that Japanese slightly different, because you might have experienced it and used it differently depending on who you've grew up around or dealt with in general. And so like there is very few cases. I mean, there are cases that you can do kind of one-to-one, but it's very rare in the sense of like there's always open to interpretations of how you want to convey that usually, because like you can kind of finagle the language a bit to kind of fit.
Yeah. And I think also like going maybe from Japanese to English, like, or any other language to English. Like I've, in my years of school, I've been around a lot of international students, and a lot of them are like always tell me like how difficult, it is sometimes to convey what they're trying to say. And they're really afraid, or they're always apologizing. Like, I'm sorry, English is not my first language, because they're so afraid they're going to say something wrong. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this is just universal when it comes to translating different languages from one to another. Because there's different ways to convey something, or little nuances that maybe as like a new speaker or something, they don't always know if they're hitting it correctly. And then I think English is just so complicated, right? Because it's the first language in a lot of different countries. And so there's a lot of other cultural aspects depending on where you live. Yeah. It's hard to identify that.
That's a good point, because like it's not just like let's say your understanding of the Japanese, but it's also your understanding of your own English language. Like depending on if you live, if you grew up West Coast, East Coast, South, like Midwest,
or like in the UK, like
or in the UK, Australia,
we're always like
anywhere.
scratchy, like what are they saying?
Yeah,
right.
Like
one thing that I didn't notice until I started spending more time online, and then I started seeing it everywhere. So the expression to step foot in a place. That was foreign to me, and I've lived in the Midwest of the United States my entire life. Step foot always sounded so weird when I would hear it in media. I would say set foot. You set foot. You don't step foot in a place. Like you don't step your foot. You can set it in a place. And so like, you know what I mean? Like, so even in localization, they're taking a phrase and they're using not only their understanding of Japanese, but their understanding of English, and they're making the choice whether they say step foot or set foot. And I've seen it both ways. I literally have seen it both ways in Japanese translated media. I've seen it both ways. So like, it's not even consistent within English. You know what I mean? The way that the writers view it, it's just going to be different depending on how they grew up.
And I wonder, like, have you guys noticed, like, when let's say it was the Xenoblade series, like it's all kind of like British style or like British style English. Is there like a online, I guess, issue amongst the English against any sort of like language that they're using, or is it because I see usually in the case of like things that are translated in American style, like English, there's always like that buildup of, I don't know, anger online, but I never see it from like the other side of things. I don't know. Well,
we do have our bias, right? Like we don't usually go around looking online for other type of languages and how they kind of, take into things. But I'm sure this must be widespread. But I don't know if there's been this hyperfixation right now on English localization, but I'm sure it happens elsewhere.
Yeah, because I always wondered, like even like in the Xeno subreddits and things like that, where it's like it's universally like it's people from all over the place. Is anyone complaining about the Xeno? Like,
I usually see complaints when it comes to in the JRPG space that it's not translated into other languages outside of English. Like there's no Spanish or French or German or what
Yeah, because I think that's the problem with
native language.
They just get like a subtitle version, right? With the Japanese and English to choose.
Yeah. Or not even sometimes.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, I think, would just prefer something, right? Than complain with not getting anything.
I know. That's the.
But yeah, I know. I get what you mean, Dalla. Like I don't know. I would be curious to see like if that's as big of a deal in England as it is in America. And, and I don't think you're right. I don't see a lot of discourse around the Xenoblade translation, localization, just in general. Like, are people?
Well, I've heard some people
comparing
don't like
scripts?
the accents are used for Xenoblade, but
Sure,
I don't know
yeah. Well,
if they were from the UK or not.
That are like,
Yeah.
Like, why is Rex sound that way? That's weird.
Yeah.
It's just way.
But I just realized I answered something else. I thought you were saying something else, Dalla, earlier about whether or not, like, people say from Japan when they're consuming, American media, do they complain about the English to Japanese translation?
Oh, yeah.
In that direction.
Yeah, I don't know what the discourse is like
question.
in Japan itself, like how they deal with their own translations.
So one thing that we can't really ignore, and as much as I'm like loath to even get into it, but when it comes to this topic, is a big part of the controversy around localization has to do with political leanings and the current state of like
the culture wars.
Yeah, in our country and in the West, kind of broadly. Everything is like, politics is a team sport, and so your team at this moment is against this list of things and therefore this list of things. And if any piece of media, portrays something on the list of things I'm against in a positive way, I have to be mad about that. I have to be up in arms about it, boycott, whatever, make a big deal online about it.
Right. I think a lot of them are just weaponizing the online media because the louder you shout, the more recognition you get. Right.
And they want to make changes to the culture by doing this or that. And I'm not even pointing the finger at one side of the spectrum or the other. Like, it's everybody's doing it. And that's like, and
everyone's weaponizing it for sure.
Yeah. And the thing that's frustrating to me, and I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm above it all, I can see the future or whatever. But just like, I don't think in 10 years anybody's going to care about any of your stuff. 10 years from now, I don't think it's going to be, I don't think they're going to think about it. It's
be a little footnote in history.
Yeah. Like, and you're like putting aside the opportunity to like have all these cool experiences now because your team is like, that's bad. We don't like that. We don't like that. Don't do that. It's like, I don't know.
People like to complain too. They just, it's the easiest form of, I guess, being on a side, just to, mutual complaining.
There's a lot of groupthink when it comes to this stuff. And,
I feel like most of the people who complain are not even the ones that were ever going to play the game to begin with, or play games in general.
Some of them are grifters, right? They're just out there to use something to make a point that they want to make.
Exactly. Like they don't actually play the games or anything like that.
In politics, not even just in our generation. Like this has been a thing. Like even if you see like at old media or history, it's just, unfortunately, that's just how you can amass a following.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Consolidate power and all this stuff. So, I mean, that's a big part of it. And localizers are accused primarily of being on one side of the political spectrum and having an agenda for that. And, I don't know if they do or not. Like, I assume that they probably believe the things that they write.
Also, I can't imagine that it's just one political party is localizing everything.
Yeah.
Right. Doesn't that seem strange? Like,
I feel like there's probably some balance happening. No,
with as split as the country is, like the idea that only people of this one political persuasion are interested in localizing. It's like, I don't know if that's true.
But even
like media is only controlled by one political party. I don't think that's true either.
And like, just the concept of like, you have to be of some certain political, like, affiliation to even translate a game, but it has nothing to do with anything. Like people, like whoever, you work for a company, you work for these like developers within their localization teams, and they don't like. I don't think when they were interviewing for those positions, they were like, "Are you of this politics?"
So who'd you vote for? That's
like it's not part of the process. I don't think they're really they care about that. But I think at the same time, like
I think skill is usually something most people look at, right, when they're
Yeah,
hiring.
that's the primary
Skill.
thing.
Like, yeah, like they're looking at like, are you good at translating and or like localizing in general? Like, do you have experience in these areas? Like, what have you done?
Do you have training? Yeah.
Like, it's not like, hey, who did you vote for in the last election? Like,
Right.
nobody cares in terms of that when it comes down to localization.
Or like, what do you look like? I highly doubt that's,
and it's not even
the
like
top priority there.
Right.
Exactly. And it's not even like the localizations like issue, because like at the end of the day, they didn't write the script. They're just translating. So a lot of these things are already inherent in the script. The characters already exist in the game. And so like a lot of the people who are up in arms are in regards to these certain like concepts and or people and or like showing of these certain types of like themes or whatever it is that is not like outwardly like approved by everybody.
I think what's worth mentioning that we haven't mentioned yet is there's, I think, a group on the internet who see Japan as some sort of sanctuary or some sort of safe harbor for certain cultural thoughts. And they can imagine that that safe harbor is going to go against whatever they believe.
Right.
So I think that's why there's been so much pushback on localization, and because it seems like we're tainting what their true Japan is, when in reality, Japan is, a complex country. Like they have their own spectrum of politics and cultural wars, right?
Exactly.
And I think the media has definitely shown that to like, it's come more to light. And I think there's been this pushback and say, no, that can't be true. It has to be the Western localization people who are pushing this.
And they don't understand that, like, video games and games in general is an outlet. It's an artistic outlet for a lot of people coming from Japan. And so like usually the concepts that are portrayed in these games are things that they want to see, either like maybe if they don't see that around them generally, like if people think of Japan in a certain way, they're probably kind of putting their own spin of like how they see society, how they want things to be. And so like you get a lot of that, like like these developers or these creators, they're internalizing a lot of that and they're showing that, like exposing what they want or what they feel and things like that. So like
also Japan's not just, its own little isolated bubble. Like they consume other media. No,
I know. It's like,
they're
I feel
inspired
like
by other things.
people get caught up in that whole idea of like the idea of Japan. Like you said, it's like they think of Japan as this like idealistic,
this romanticization or whatever.
This kind of like nationalistic thought process of like being just one society of like these specific type of people or specific
and they all believe the same thing.
Exactly. And like that's just not
aligns,
the case.
Naturally it aligns with what I believe. So that's convenient.
I mean, have you seen like if you go to Japan, like you can see like the number of different politicians of different spectrums screaming off the megaphones at each other, talking about whatever thought, like, whatever they believe and whatever they like each other believe. And so like there's so many different spectrums within Japan of like what they think and what they like want. And so like it's
just like any other
doing
society.
a disservice. Yeah, it's like doing a disservice to sit there and just like generalizing that. And that's the whole problem. Is like I think the whole problem like it's a lot of generalization of what people think should be the case.
I think it would be useful to talk about a few like popular examples in recent memory.
For sure.
So, in Trails Through Daybreak, and for those of you listening, the time to Trails, TTT or 3T for this episode looks about 39 minutes. So jot that down.
I will mark it in the chapters.
Those of you in the Discord that are members of the channel will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's a running
Trails. So in Daybreak, when you meet the character of Catra, Van, the main character, is confused about the gender that Catra is because it's a little hard to tell when you first meet Catra.
Very androgynistic, right?
Yeah. And so he asks about, I don't remember how he puts it, if he just asks about gender or if he uses the word pronouns. Yeah.
He uses pronouns.
So there was a lot of pushback, to put it lightly, on the internet about his use of the word pronouns, because that's, again, one of those things that one group is supposed to be mad about, the use of that term. And I think the argument in favor of putting it that way was just, in American society in the 21st century, that's how we talk about the same thing that they were getting at in the original Japanese script, right? Like, I don't know exactly what he said. I don't have it in front of me, but like what Van was asking was basically that. And the way we would ask that question, we wouldn't use the same words he uses. That's how we would ask that question. right? Like
yes.
that's just localization. We're making it make sense to the audience that it's for.
Unfortunately, this has, I think, tipped again to the cultural wars here in the West about gender versus sex. And I think there's just been so much animosity towards the idea of asking for someone's pronouns when honestly, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's not like how would, I guess a lot of people wanted the van just to ask, are you a boy or a girl, rather than asking for pronouns. But I don't think you usually ask people, are you a guy or a girl this day and age, at least here in the US, or at least where I am. It's kind of considered rude. And pronouns has become the soft way to ask nowadays. Now, does everyone accept it that way? No, of course not. But I think that just has been something that's more adapted. That's why the localizers use that instead of, are you a boy or a girl?
And the idea of something being considered rude in one language and not rude in another is very important to the topic of localization. So you'll get characters in Japanese media that will say something to another character like, you're really short, aren't you? And like, that's literally what they're saying in Japanese.
Yeah.
Yep.
In Japanese, that is not really offensive. Like they apparently say stuff like that to each other all the time. It's just
pretty open. Yeah.
It's just pretty, it's not, but
they're
if somebody said that,
things,
they're just like,
you don't usually describe how people look, at least here in the US, right?
Exactly.
That's considered mean-spirited.
So if you have a character that says that, if they localize that, if they translate that in English and the character says, oh, you're really short, aren't you? We read that as rude, right? We read that as a rude thing
especially
to say to somebody.
If it's a dude, right?
Sure.
Usually that's our cultural thing, right?
And if the character is not being rude in Japanese, then what the localizer has done by word for word translating this is introduced something into the script that was not there. And that's the irony of it. They're like, oh, quit putting in this stuff that wasn't in the original. Quit putting this in your localization. That's exactly what you're doing when you do a word for word translation. Often you're inserting meaning that was not there in the original.
Yeah.
When Tifa climbing I'm not going to say the word, but when Tifa is climbing the stairs in the Shinra building in Final Fantasy VII, she uses the R slur. Okay. Now, people were upset that she didn't say that in the remake. And it's like, do you understand? Like, even at the time, it's a little iffy, but like nowadays, if a character said that, they would be interpreted very differently as like the sort of person that they are than the original. You know what I mean? Like, it would completely change people's view of who Tifa is. It would give them the wrong impression of who she is. Right. So you have to change things like that because the audience that you're writing to, what you're doing. This. Okay. Hang on.
You got this, Branden.
You got it.
Scripts, media, it's not just words on a page. Localization is not just taking these words and turning them into these words. It's conveying meaning, right? Yeah. The point of communication is not to spit words at somebody. It's to convey meaning. And the way in which
equal understanding of that meaning.
Equal mutual understanding.
Yeah, mutual.
And if you translate something literally and it creates a disconnect in that meaning for the audience that you're writing it for, it's not the audience's fault. You're not doing the job. It's not the audience's fault. And that's what I think people on the other side of this argument would say. Well, they just need to get with it and pay more attention to the Japanese media and learn more about their culture and blah, blah, blah.
They just need to learn Japanese.
Right. And that, you know what I mean? Like, that's the key. That's the answer. That's the answer to the people that are so mad about localizations. It's like, it's easier than ever to learn Japanese.
It is.
It's so easy now to do that. It's going to take you a little while. You're not going to be able to do it overnight, but like, imagine the world of possibilities that are open to you if you learn Japanese, and then you have access to all this media, even stuff that we don't get.
Even visiting Japan today is easier than ever and cheap.
Yeah. Cheap. Well,
cheap.
I don't understand what you did. You did the wrong way, Branden.
It's just the flight. The flight is so expensive.
The flights, even I was checking the other day because I was like, I could go back to Japan. And it was like between $1,600 to $1,800 for a round trip ticket.
It was around 2,000. I mean, we're flying during prime season, but it was around $2,000 per ticket round trip. I'm like, that's like the majority of our cost.
But honestly, like Branden, you're completely right at that. Because like at the end of the day, when you are localizing something and you're translating something, you're not translating word for word. You're not looking at a sheet and being like, all right, I'm just going to translate the sentence exactly the way I think of it, without the context of the story, without the context of the characters, without the context of everything that I know to be true. Like what you do is you gauge the character, you know who the character is, you know their personality, you look at the situation as a whole of what they're saying across maybe a period of the game, and then they're going to sit there and be like, all right, like they said this one thing, is this going to translate one-to-one, or am I going to have to tweak it to kind of fit what we believe here in the US locally? Like you said, in terms of like, if they said something like you're short, like if that character doesn't have that characteristic of being mean, and you throw that in all of a sudden, then you're going to be like, wait, like, what is he trying to do? Like, why is he saying that? Like, why, like, we're going to overthink that, because it's going to be like a personality shift for that character. Yep. So like they have to take that context. They have to sit there and be like, all right, I need to like downplay that language and change it to something that's more fitting to what that character is going to say, and fitting to the American language, to how we would convey that without being like offensive in a way.
And you might have to change. You might have to outright change it.
Yeah.
You might have to write a line that does not in any way correspond one-to-one with the original line.
Exactly.
And when that happens, I'm sure that there's a lot of thought that goes into it, generally speaking. And I'm sure it's a struggle to determine, okay, what's too far? How can we convey a similar idea? It's an art form.
It's not black and white of what you could do.
Yeah.
Like there's so many people who are championing AI as the new translation mechanism because they think localizers are, being disingenuous with the localizations. And I honestly think that's going to be the wrong direction for all this. We're going to be going backwards of the progress we've made with localization as a whole.
I can barely get AI to write like a proper paragraph rather than like translating a whole game.
Also, like if you're worried about mistranslations, I think AI is definitely not going to help you there. And out of context things and asserting things that are, again, disingenuous to the characters that you want, to be conveyed properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would have to be a very complex like prompting system to even get that, because you'd have to teach AI to be a character.
Not advanced enough.
Like, AI is not quite there, and the amount of work.
There. Yeah,
don't get me wrong. I think AI as a tool could be useful, but again, it's only as a tool. It's not going to be the main driving force.
100%. Like I've heard from localizers who say like, yeah, I use some AI tools to help me with my work, but it's not translating for me.
No,
right?
Exactly.
And that is useful. Like AI can be useful as a tool. It's a tool right now. Now, I'm not going to say, I don't know what the future holds. Like, I don't want to bet against technology, because I feel like every time in history that's been done, you've been proven wrong if you bet against technology. Is it possible that someday in the future we'll have some singularity that is like perfect at localizing and captures the author's intent and translates it beautifully into a new language? Yeah, maybe.
But I'm going to say that
we're not there anytime soon.
We're not there, and I would never want, like, Gen AI is great and all, and using it from that perspective is fun, but like to take away from anything creative and take away jobs from creatives is a hard no. I think it's keeping it
it's just there. It's going to create soulless media.
Yeah,
like if we're so annoyed with, I think, our present day media and how things aren't fun anymore, just imagine if it's all written both. Like AI.
Yeah, exactly. It's all going to be like samesies all over the place. Like you'll get just a bunch of similar content.
I read a Japanese novel recently, localized, believe it or not. It was called Titan, and it was about like artificial intelligence and these super intelligences. And in the world that book took place in, interestingly, most media was created by AI, but there was like a boutique market for stuff created by people. And it was like considered this higher class, higher quality thing to partake in because it was made by a person. Right. So it's like, if you just want to sit down and watch a mindless movie or play a mindless video game, there's some generated AI stuff that you could sit down and play and probably have fun, it's fine. But if you want to have like a deep, meaningful experience, like you're going to pay a little extra and you're going to get this something made by a person. So I think that's, when I read that, I was like, that feels the most likely future for us. Like if AI continues to be a force.
I mean, they can't wait till they can make like a Call of Duty by AI.
Are they not already?
I'm sure. Like Fortnite is probably ran on AI.
I'm just kidding. Call of Duty fans, I'm just kidding.
I know. I'm just kidding.
I've played a little Call of Duty. It's fun. Yeah. Anyway, it's a tricky thing, and I understand that nothing that we've said here is going to change anybody's mind. Most likely, it's not.
No.
But it is something that's, I think, worth talking about and continuing to talk about. If for no other reason than just everybody needs to get used to hearing opinions that they don't agree with. I try to, when I hear opinions I don't agree with, I try to hear them out because, we don't want to be closed off to other ideas, even if they don't sway us, even if they don't change our minds. Like there's no harm in being open-minded and considerate of other people. So
there's like a piece
also
of
like it. Right, like if we all had the same opinion, the life would just be so boring. No,
right,
exactly.
Right.
Just be manufactured AI, basically, is what we would be.
Yeah. And like there are certain aspects, I think, of localization that can be a little iffy.
Well, we talked about the Pokemon one, no?
Yeah,
Onigiri and Jellyful Donuts.
Yeah,
it's a little silly looking back. And then some of the maybe we didn't talk about working designs and their localizations.
That's what I was going to bring up.
There were definitely liberties taken there.
Yeah. It's like I can see, like, I know Branden and I have very deep nostalgia for working designs and their interpretation of media, and it's super like of the time. The jokes are. If looking back at it, if you play it now, you'd be like, "That's pretty lame," and pretty funny in a lame, cheesy way.
It's like a dad joke,
exactly,
kind of, and that's fun.
It's fun and it's great, and I think that's also with Daybreak 2 recently, using Riz and using things like that are very much like slang of the new generational slang. Let's say there are certain areas of localization I can see where the argument against using local, like generational slang is useful because, looking back, 20 years from now, if you go back to that,
outdated.
It becomes very outdated very quick. So if you if you incorporate just more typical,
yeah, that's an interesting point. And somebody brought that up in a comment. I don't know if it was on one of our videos, or it was on one of mine on my own channel.
I remember reading something about that.
About how, using that sort of slang dates the work, and it's better to use more general sort of vanilla language. Yeah. And I was like, I understand that. Like if you want to come back to Trails Through Daybreak 2 30 years from now, you might roll your eyes at the use of Riz if you aren't already rolling your eyes at the use of Riz. But I feel like the works, and this is controversial, but the works that are readable and don't cause any sort of side eye are a little more boring.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like there's lacking in flavor that I really appreciate. I really appreciate the flavor of slang and just the way people talk,
But also the game was developed, within the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in Japan, like the Japanese language, there was some sort of slang that's maybe, again, could be outdated in a few years in Japan, but they still probably incorporate it into their game. So I don't really see any harm doing that. Same thing in English localization.
Yeah. It's like it's the only argument that I can see people having, like, it's a take that you can be like, okay, like I understand that. Do I agree with it?
Riz is silly. I agree. But
I mean, I found it hilarious.
I thought it was funny.
I thought it was hilarious, and but I don't really care. Like honestly, generational slang.
It's just one line,
to me.
one word.
And to me, I just kind of read that. I was like, okay, it's. I mean, because like those characters are young too. Like if you think about it, like
they're teenagers. And
well, Nadia's ridiculous anyway. She says the most ridiculous stuff.
And
so
like,
if anyone would just say it, it'd be her.
Yeah, exactly. Like Nadia's already like a crazy person.
They're written like teenagers because they are teenagers, and that's in again localization. That's when we think of teenagers. That's who teenagers are, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and that's one of those things that, like most of this stuff, we can disagree
Nitpick
on it, right? And that's fine. It's not a big deal to have a preference for the more standardized language that's going to stand the test of time. I can understand that, especially if you're somebody who plans on revisiting media many, many times over the years. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case for me, so it's not as big of a deal. I mean, I will play all of the Trails games probably 50 times by the time I die. But
would you want like your favorite anime series from, let's say, 20 years ago to have a more generalized, non-interesting flavor, if you will?
No.
I don't know if I necessarily would, or any books I read, like that I consumed maybe this time in my life. Like if I wanted to revisit it, it's kind of, there's a fondness of looking back at some of those old slang terms and like, we used to say that back then, or people were saying that.
It's an emotional time capsule, right?
Get to. Yeah.
I don't go back and watch like the Legend of Zelda cartoon and think, excuse me, princess, is something that I don't want to hear. Like when he says that,
I'm here for it.
I'm here for it. And and that's what builds nostalgia. Like, and that's the whole idea of like, if we cut generational things,
why do we want to erase nostalgic, ties?
So like it takes us back to a period. And so like hearing that slang, hearing that kind of like those jokes, those things, and that's what makes, we're talking about working designs. That's nostalgic to us. Like we hear that and it takes us back to like being a teenager or like very young and just playing through those games and that period of time. And so like it is truly a time capsule.
And I think that's the key, right? Is people that are upset about Riz or whatever in a game today, they're not kids.
No,
they're in their 30s or 40s. And they're like, this is not how, or more. And they're like, this is not how I talk. So I don't have any fondness for this. Like a teenager playing Trails Through Daybreak 2 today, playing it again 20 years from now, they might be like, oh yeah. And they might have a warm fondness for that memory of that period of time. But somebody
also, speaking of like, generational differences when you're playing the game today, I think because the characters are so young, a lot of like older players like to think they're older than they actually are because they want to relate more to them. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when they see words like Riz, it might take them out of it. Be like, oh, I can't relate to this character because they really are Gen Alpha.
And it's okay. Like for me, like if you had a choice between accepting the fact that maybe these games aren't for you anymore, and if you need to grow up and move away from
the fact that you're old, it's okay.
Yeah, or old. Or don't complain on the internet about it. Then choose the one like at the end. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But like, don't.
There's so much media out there
for everybody else.
Not everything has to be for you.
Exactly.
Not everything has to be for me. Like it's okay.
We don't play every game. Like there's plenty of games that I have no care ever to play. I'm not sitting here going to cry about it on the internet, but like there's just a bunch of stuff that I don't care about. Like,
if anything, it's a blessing because if we wanted to play everything, where would time be? We wouldn't be able to get to all of it, right?
Exactly. The backlog
it's helping
us
limit what we actually want to focus on.
Exactly. Like the backlog is there. I don't need to like add everything to the backlog. So like at the end of the day, you just play what makes you happy. And if you don't like it, don't play it. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think there are just too many people who like to complain on the internet. And that's what they'll continue doing.
Yeah. Some of it is just like the group thing we were talking about, right? Like feels good to be a part of a group and, and
negativity is something that's easy to latch onto.
And I don't want to discount, with having said all that, I don't want to discount the people that do legitimately have a fondness for, say, the Trails games or any modern game that has some localization choices they don't agree with. I can understand why that would be frustrating if you really do like this particular story, but you're mad about how it's being presented. I don't agree, obviously, because in my mind, I will defer to the localizer almost all the time. And that's not to say that localizers haven't made mistakes or localizers haven't done something even maliciously to insert something that wasn't in the original and is not done in good faith, right? Not done for the purpose of localizing, is done to insert some sort of meaning that wasn't there. I know that has happened, but I don't think that it is a widespread problem. I think they are isolated. There's not
just people don't go into localization thinking they're going to brainwash the youth or whatever.
Yeah,
It's not.
Generally, they have a fondness for the media and want to share that with other people, and identify the bad actors and get them out. Sure, but
when you cry wolf for everything, it's really hard to recognize what are some of the the bad things that are happening maybe in localization.
You have to understand, and it's coincidentally, I have a video also coming out, I think this week. I'm not sure if it's going to come out before this episode or after, talking about localization and working designs in particular. One of the issues, I think, is that some people today view your everyday normal localization done by a company like NIS America or Atlas or Xseed, whatever, as being the same thing that working designs did. They're like, I had people comment on my videos about Trails like, oh, I can't wait to see the Nisa fanfic of Trails Through Daybreak 2. And it's like, that's provably not what they're doing. Like, it's, I understand that it feels that way. I get that. But like what working designs did is an order of magnitude different than what modern localization is doing. And because these ideas are just kind of conflated for people, it's hard. Like anybody that feels that way, that were to sit down and if they were to listen to us talking for an hour without, bursting a blood vessel in their temple from being so furious, like they're not
closing the video.
They're not going to be receptive to us talking about it because that conflation is so complete. Like they just think that it's the same thing that working designs did back in the day. And it's just decidedly not that. It's very different. I don't know how to convince anybody of that fact, because that would require a lot of like reading and research and developing an understanding that nobody has the time to do. I get that. But it is what it is. What can you do?
Yeah, unfortunately. But I think it's safe to say that all three of us at least are in agreement that we think localization has improved over the years for the better.
It's in a
even if there's been some missteps along the way, I think overall, if you look at the grand picture of things, we're getting so much more translated media that we could understand and also have a better understanding of, let's say, Japanese culture because of the integration of Japanese words and other cultural ideas in a conveyable way to English native speakers, at least. That I think it's been a good thing overall.
It is, yeah. If you had told young me that like this sort of like video games and anime and stuff would be such a big part of my life at 41, I'd be like, what are you talking about? That seems crazy. This is going to be a niche secret thing forever. It's like, it's pretty mainstream now,
Yeah. The pandemic definitely helped with that. And hopefully it's here to stay, Yeah.
I think so.
Definitely.
So that's that. Let us know your thoughts, of course, in the comments. Should we?
I know we talked about a lot of things about this, and it's kind of obvious, I guess, where our stance is on the thing. But we are, of course, receptive to if you have a different opinion, and if you talk about it cordially.
Yeah, we're not going to delete comments if you're disagreeing with us. If you're nasty about it, we're going to have to, don't be nasty.
If you are out of line, of course, if you're name calling us because you don't have a better way to, express your opinion.
Yeah.
That's what I say on my channel too. It's like, if you disagree with me, like that's fine. I'm not going to like delete comments of people that disagree with me, but just, be kind, be, whatever.
Just be, respectful.
Just be normal in the comments.
I don't think we are being disrespectful at all.
Yeah. Like, just be normal.
And if I was, point it out and let me know, and I'll try to do better. I'm trying to, not be flippant about things that people disagree with me, but that's something I have done in the past, and I regret that. But anyway, should we
we're
talk
human.
about some of the talk about some of the games that we've been playing or picking up or whatever? Because I feel like we haven't done that in a while. We've had a lot of guests.
It's been a while.
Recently.
Yeah.
So,
I think we're due for another pickups and update of what we're playing. So who would like to go first?
I can.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
So I don't remember if I showed this one or not, but I did finally get my copy of Final Fantasy VII Intergrade remake. Intergrade.
Ooh,
Gonna be
PlayStation
twins.
5. You got the twinsies there, yeah.
Nice.
So glad to finally have that. Still regret not getting the Steelbook back in the day. Like I said, I had ordered it, and then I was like, "Oh, that's a bad move. Don't do that. That's a waste of money," and I canceled it. So, next up,
It's just a Steelbook. It's okay.
It's just the most gorgeous Steelbook that's ever existed. I love that thing so much. I have In Stars and Time for PlayStation 5. And this one, it's an indie JRPG that has just looked very, very interesting to me. And I'm excited to have it. It seems to be pretty well received, well regarded. So I was okay buying it sight unseen to support them and to have it. So, and then I guess the last thing, well, I did get my pop-up parade. I'm not going to get it down, but my pop-up parade of Altina, the large figure. The
How is she next to the Kotobukiya one?
I have not taken her out of the box yet. Just got her, so I'm not sure. But it's a 1/6 or 1/7? Is that, do you know?
Pop-up parades are not scaled figures.
They're not scaled.
But it's going to be very close to probably a 1/8.
Oh, okay.
I don't know about the large one, though. So maybe a little bit bigger.
Okay.
So she might be a little bit taller than the Kotobukiya first Altina. I don't know if you saw the photo of the new Altina coming out with the Kai outfit, but she's a lot taller than her first Kotobukiya scale figure.
That's strange. Are they implying that
It's because she grew up a little bit, right, between those games? Older? But it's just she's older.
Well, she's older, but like, do they age? It doesn't.
I think she does. I think she's a little bit like at least her character model is a little bit bigger.
Okay. Well, then that makes sense.
It's just funny having them next to each other.
That I have is the Project Cross Zone 2 that Dalla, you were with me. We came across in somewhere in Illinois. I don't know where we were. We have it on video, and one of these days I will get around to putting together a video of our game hunting. Maybe I'll just wait till you're in town, Emily, and we'll do another one, and we'll just do a big game hunting video or something.
Sounds fun.
But yeah. Excited to finally have both of the Cross Zone games. I never thought that I would have them because I never saw them in the wild. And so when I did see this one, I was like,
Got to get it.
As far as what I'm playing, I've just, obviously I finished Daybreak 2 a little bit ago. And I've been playing Frameland on Steam. It's a indie RPG, turn-based kind of deal, uses timing mechanics. It's really cool looking, and the story, I'm only a little ways into it, maybe an hour or two, but it's intriguing so far. The timing based mechanics in battle are so precise, like almost frustratingly precise. Like you have to be really good. So it has the effect of being a little bit frustrating, but also you feel super great when you do pull it off, which is nice. So enjoying that so far. I will probably at some point talk about it at least on my channel. I was going to do I want to get some more indies under my belt, which is another reason I picked up the In Stars and Time to, start talking a little bit more about that, just because I just need a change. I've been playing all the big games lately. So
Yeah,
it's good to break those up, I think. And indie, I do find indies are a bit of a blind spot for me as well, because you hear about the big indies, right, that everyone's played and sings praises about, but I think there's a lot that slipped through the cracks. JRPG space.
Yeah, I don't play a lot of JRPG indie games. I do play a lot of indies in general, like platformers and or some roguelites and things like that. But the JRPG scene is mostly Uncharted.
For me, I'm often hesitant to try because they're all based off of it, another game. They usually draw inspiration from their favorite game. And oftentimes it looks like the inspiration's very central to everything.
Yes.
Which if I haven't played the original, then I'm not sure if I want to, play the indie one. If you will.
Yeah, the ones I've been looking at lately don't feel as much that way, which is nice.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, so there definitely is a spectrum of indies out there.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can identify some that I think are worth people's time and talk about them. So
yeah, that'd be nice. Tell us a few. I want to try that Otome one.
Oh yeah,
I always forget the name of that though.
It's Silent Kingdom, or
yes, I think that's it. Silent
Is that right?
Kingdom. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think is it just like the first volume's out? I think
the
it's
first chapter
gonna come out in chapters.
Coming out in pieces. Okay,
I think it's going to be like 3 chapters or something, 3 or 4 chapters for the thing, and then they said that it's going to be like because it's out in what do they call it mode?
Early access.
Early access right now.
Yeah, so I usually wait.
I don't mess around with early access.
Yeah, early access. I don't mess around with either. Even like Hades 2, which is a game I'm really anticipating. I haven't touched yet because I'm waiting.
I know. I really want to play that, but I also don't mess around too much with early access. But I'm looking forward to whenever that game does officially fully drop.
Same.
Yeah. Emily, do you want to go next?
Sure. So Branden showed off the first one.
Yes.
Integrate for the PS5, courtesy of Video Games Plus and their reprints. And that was a reprint I was hesitant to get because I have it on PS4. So I was like, do I really need it on the PS5? But then I decided to go for it.
Yeah.
Because
I spent a decent amount of time trolling Facebook Marketplace looking for people that had copies of Intergrade for PS5 and were all charging, if they had it, like over $100. So I was like, I'll get it. I'll just get it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I made a video about reprint FOMO and how the price in the aftermarket makes games more desirable. And that's why I think this model has been doing very well for places like Video Games Plus and getting people to buy these, games at MSRP. And I think this is also why I've been seeing a lot of new releases, at least in the JRPG niche space, have very low print runs because if people really want it, they'll get it on the second wave with a pre-order.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Unfortunately, I think this is just the way that games are going to be sold nowadays.
Yep.
So you either get them or they're gone.
Just or you pay up, or you pay up on the aftermarket.
Or you pay up.
Yeah.
And that's I've just over time been getting more comfortable with that idea. It's like if I really, really want to play a game and I have to pay more for it, okay, maybe I'll make a sacrifice and sell something that I don't need or don't want, and I will be able to play it is kind of the thing. So
yeah, I've been trying to do the same mindset, especially not doing pre-orders if I know the game's not going to be like fully on the cart or disc.
Yeah.
And just wait to see how the build is when it comes out.
Sure.
That's true.
With exceptions, of course, that we've talked about before. But another one I got was Moon here. This is the RPG that's not an RPG. And I'm interested in this. I don't know too much about it other than it's not RPG. I think, Branden, you picked this up recently too, right?
I just ordered it. Yeah, it hasn't arrived yet, but I did order it.
Yeah. So I haven't played too many of these type of games. Like I know Undertale has like a certain way to play style that's similar, right? Where you don't attack people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Moon was marketed as like the anti-RPG or something like that.
Yeah,
yeah. That's what it was for.
Like you don't go stealing things in people's houses or something, right? And like all the things, that RPG players always do, which seems unconventional in reality.
Another interesting piece of trivia about Moon is it was localized by Tim Rogers. Are you guys familiar with Tim Rogers?
Yes.
He's great. I like him.
He's great. He's he hasn't done a video in a while, but he used to do these like really long form deep dives into certain kind of obscure games. And he's a very good writer. So I'm interested to read his script, if nothing else.
He's got
I didn't realize that. That's cool.
He's a very dry, he has a very dry, what do you call it? Delivery. And I appreciate that very much. It's got that great sarcasm that I enjoy.
My last pickup though, was something that was sent to me by, somehow I got onto Microsoft's I guess, influencer email list. I don't know how. But Obsidian and Xbox sent me Avowed, the Steelbook version, and the Steelbook is super pretty.
It is
Though,
nice.
as everyone knows, there's no disc in it. There's not even a disc holder, which I guess is good because they're self-aware. There's no disc in here. But I've been playing this, and I haven't played much of Obsidian's RPGs in the past, but I've been having fun with it. There's a lot of cool magic elements and exploration that has been pretty neat. And I'm still not sure if I prefer the first person or third person view walking around, because I haven't played like a first person game in so long. So it was a little bit awkward adjusting to that for me. But overall, I've been enjoying it, and I've been playing it alongside my Daybreak 2 playthrough, which for Daybreak 2, I'm on the controversial Act 3 right now. And up to that point, I've been enjoying it. Like, are there little things I can nitpick about it? Sure. But I've been having fun with it.
Yeah. I gotta play some more Avowed. I played like about an hour of it when it came out, and I enjoyed it. It was a very beautiful looking game. I like. They
just updated it too, I think.
Oh, okay. I'll check it out again.
I don't know what they did, but they did something.
Yeah, it's nice, and I usually like for the first person versus third person in those. Like if the game was built in first person, it's always like weird to move into third person because it just always plays a little odd. Because like I think what was that, Fallout did the same thing.
Fallout had that, yeah.
And I could never get used to like their third person view.
Let's say Skyrim and
Skyrim,
like the Elder Scrolls games as well.
They always give you the option, and it was always just like a little odd.
Yeah. I think it's not too bad in this, but I'm trying to get used to the first person because it's just something I haven't done since I played first person shooters back in the day.
It's been a while.
But what have you been up to, Abdallah?
Yeah, so I picked up a couple of things that are not like they're just a little old stuff. So, but I picked up Dragon Quest Monsters not too long ago.
Dark Prince.
Dark Prince.
The Dark
Is this
Prince.
The subtitle on that box is so tiny.
I know
it's tiny. There's
and
so many.
You're embarrassed of it. Why is it? It's
and like
it's the first one on the Switch, but I don't know.
And the coloring
because there's so many spin-off games, right?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of Dragon Quest Monsters games.
Yeah. Well, this is like the only one on the Switch, I think, right?
It's on Switch. Yeah.
Made for the Switch. Yeah.
So like, and also like the text just doesn't read well.
It just looks like Times New Roman under this like ornate.
Yeah. It's really bad.
I sometimes question the font design in Square Enix recently.
I know.
It's all the same and boring in my opinion.
It's been pretty ugly. And just unoriginal. But it was a good price, and I didn't grab it the first time around when it went down in price, and I was like teetering on whether I should get it or not, and then the second time it went down, I was like, okay, fine, I'll grab it and just try it out. I enjoy Pokemon-esque type style games, even though I don't like play Pokemon as much anymore. So maybe this might, fill that void. Another game I picked up, I've been wanting to pick it up, but it's been out of stock, is Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, actually.
Oh, that's like...
Did you make sure to get one? Or I guess it's not... I heard with the Switch version, they're now doing the code in the box.
Oh, no.
So you can hear it.
You can hear it. It's that fun. I hate every time I get a PS5 game. It's never in.
Yeah, I don't think there's not a code in the box for the PS5, but then do it for the Switch version.
Yeah, no,
because those carts are more expensive, I guess.
Yeah, mostly like this game, I was definitely going to play it on the PS5 just because like it's one of those like really you play fast.
The Metroidvania games, I think it's a little bit smoother experience, right?
Exactly. It's about the frame rate for these kind of things because it's about timing and all these different mechanics that like you need that 60 frames on the PS5 to truly feel good about it. And maybe the Switch 2 will play it better. Who knows? But I don't know. Can't say for certain though. But
find out in a month.
This might be a nice little like palette cleanser for in between games soon. But I've been wanting to try it out, and I've heard good things about it. And it's sad that the Ubisoft, I guess, closed down that studio that did this one, or that team.
Yeah.
So I wanted
That's
to at
the
least
new normal. Studio puts out a cool game.
Yeah,
Shut it down. Get them out of
exactly.
here. No more of that, please. No more good games.
I know.
Well, we're going to be in a drought, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Next couple of years. We'll see.
We'll have to talk about that one of these days soon, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The upcoming inevitable drought. But everybody, thank you so much for watching, listening, doing what you do. If you are not already a member, we would love it if you would consider becoming a member. At the Pursuer level, you get access to the after show, which is a lot of fun. But regardless, you get access to the Discord, where we have a lot of fun discussions. People are very active in there, and it's a lot of fun.
And I think
we're going to have an event
join us.
soon with Xenoblade Chronicles X.
Xenoblade X Definitive Edition.
We do some
We're going to
multiplayer.
group up and we're going to play, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So please consider joining us. Also, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the YouTube channel, liking the video, that helps us a lot as well. So yeah, thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.